At least 3 towns showed up at our dealership to tell us that we needed to calm down and whoever was driving the red Jeep should get a ticket. I decided to leave the press fleet business and get a more normal job that paid well, and it was soul sucking to say the least. I felt like I was in the movie Office Space. I definitely had a Lumbergh sitting next to me, and after 3 months, I just could not take it anymore. So I did what any rational human being would do. I went and applied at the local Jeep store about 4 times. And each time the manager said, "Oh yeah, I have your resume right here. I looked at it. Yeah, I'm going to give you a call. I'm going to give you a call." And after the third or fourth time, the general manager finally got up, grabbed me, pulled me into an office on the side, and hired me on the spot. So thus started my interesting career into car sales. The store that I worked in was one of the largest in New Jersey, and it was interesting to say the least. So I started off training with a guy who's named Mo. He's a big black guy. He was actually a preacher, and I think he's now a full-time preacher. And I'm short, so we made quite the combo walking around as I was training. And Mo showed me the ins and outs of car sales. And what he used me for the first few days was test drives. And that brings me to my first memorable story. On one particular day, Mo had a customer that wanted to test drive a Cherokee with the forward collision warning. She had apparently just totaled her Audi A4 by rear-ending somebody and wanted something to slam on the brakes for her. So he said, "Hey, can you take this woman out on a test drive for me?" "Yeah, no problem, Mo." So we go out on a drive, and the woman decided that she wanted to try out the forward collision warning. Now, mind you, I am 3 days into the job, so I don't know what the yeses and nos are, what the cans and can'ts are. So we proceed to drive down the street, pull into a local park, and drive through it with her doing 35 to 40 miles an hour, zooming up to cars, almost rear-ending them, and then slamming on the brakes because the car didn't hit the brakes on its own. We got back to the dealership, and she immediately said, "Well, this feature doesn't work. I don't want this car," and walked out. I looked white as a sheet, I'm assuming, because Mo looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No." And I told him the story, and he explained to me that when you are a car salesman and you're out on test drives, you do have the right to say, "Pull over, get out of the car, I'm driving back, you're being irresponsible." I wish I had known that before seeing my life flash before my eyes, but unfortunately it wasn't the last time I had seen my life flash before my eyes in a test drive. So my next memorable test drive story is with an exchange student. So a Chinese exchange student came in and said, "Hey, I want to look at a Grand Cherokee Summit." I said, "No problem." Had a demo, grabbed it, and the gentleman proceeded to almost get into an accident 4 times. That sounds bad enough, but when you consider that our test drive loop was 2 miles long, it probably shouldn't have been on the road. I don't know how he got a license, but he somehow managed to get one. He should not have been on the road, and it was a terrifying experience. Another great experience I had with test drives was with Wranglers. With Jeep, there is also a company called AEV, American Expedition Vehicles. AEV is a Chrysler Tier 1 supplier, meaning that they supply parts for OEM vehicles. So if you see the old Modern Warfare Wranglers with the steel bumpers, they have AEV bumpers on them. Well, AEV is the equivalent of Celine for Wranglers. They would do lift kits, they would do engine swaps, they would do 6.4 Hemis and 5.7 Hemis into Wranglers, and they would also make something called a Brute, which looks like a Gladiator that was made in 2013. If you look at the two of them parked next to each other, it looks like Jeep copied their homework. It's the same thing. It's got Wrangler rear doors. The Gladiator has Wrangler rear doors. It is what it is. I think they both have composite beds too. They really went far on copying the idea. But anyway, when AEV made us a dealer, they brought a vehicle for us to try out. And it was the rep's vehicle. It was a red 2014 model with 37-inch tires and a 6.4 Hemi in it. And of course, being responsible salespeople at a Jeep dealership, we drove the daylights out of it. At least 3 towns showed up at our dealership to tell us that we needed to calm down and whoever was driving the red Jeep should get a ticket. Unfortunately, there were about 20, 25 different people driving the Jeep, so nobody knew who was really driving the red Jeep. But the test drive that took the cake with that was my manager. My manager hadn't gotten a chance to drive it, and all of us had. I mean, even I was out there beating the snot out of this thing, and let me tell you, it was a durable truck for what we put it through. So my manager hops in the car, coworker of mine hops in the front seat, and I hop in the back. So we start driving down the road, and we get off the highway onto the normal test drive route. And my coworker looks at my manager and says, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You're driving like a pussy." And my manager just looks over at him, stone-faced, and proceeds to rip the wheel 90 degrees. Now, there was not an entrance to that parking lot at that point, but we went right over the curb, and his foot never came off the accelerator pedal. He proceeded to rip across the parking lot and hit a planter/curb, and we got airtime. My head hit the ceiling, bounced back down into the seat. He drove over another curb, over the grass, and back out onto the road without missing a beat at all. He then proceeded to drive like a madman as well, and we ended up getting pulled over maybe 1,000 feet from the dealership, and he got a ticket for not wearing his seatbelt. The AEV Wranglers, even though they have crazy body roll and they're lifted Wranglers, they actually handle better than a stock Wrangler, which is really hard to believe considering that, by the time you put on tires and a lift, they're 8 to 10 inches taller. So the center of gravity is significantly higher. But whatever they did with the suspension geometry and the wheels and scrub radius, all that stuff, they made the trucks handle pretty well. You had to get used to it because body roll was significant, but you couldn't roll the truck. On one particular day, I had a customer come in because I was in charge of AEV sales. Customer came in and wanted to look at one, and I'm going over the vehicle and I'm explaining to him, yeah, you can actually take a 90-degree turn at 60 miles an hour in this truck. And he goes, listen, it's a lifted Jeep. I get it. You don't have to feed me a line of BS. I know it's not going to handle well. And at that point, he was in the driver's seat, so I politely told him to get out of the driver's seat and told him that I was going to take him for a ride. We go out for a ride, and the first part of our test drive loop was a 90-degree turn, and I took it at 60 miles an hour. And I didn't realize that there was a little girl sitting next to me, but the customer turned into a little girl who was screaming as we went around the turn. And of course, truck didn't roll. It had significant body lean, but didn't roll over, went around the turn just fine. We got back to the dealership and he bought the truck. It's amazing when you drive that truck because the thing is doing this, but you can't roll it. I actually 3-wheeled it. I went around a 15-mile-an-hour turn at 35, and you heard the front left tire touch down as I got out of the turn. So when I was working there, the facelifted Challengers came out. Hellcat wasn't out yet. We were taking deposits on them. But the Scat Packs were out with the 6.4 Hemi. And the first one we got was a white one, black spoiler, automatic. I think it had a black roof too. Didn't have a sunroof. They, for whatever reason, the early ones I don't think had them. But really nice car, leather suede inside, and the updated interior going from an old Mercedes dash and old technology to that big 8.4 touchscreen that just about every Chrysler product has now. It was huge. So I ended up selling the car to a guy who traded in an RT for the Scat Pack. And a couple days later, he came into the dealership absolutely furious. Now, backing up a few days, when the car came in, of course, my GM decided to take it as a demo for the weekend. And then my new car manager decided to take it for the weekend. Between the two of them, to give you a quick example, when we decided to get gas in the Scat Pack with the GM, I hopped in with him. He pulled out onto a 4-lane road and proceeded to do a 150-foot-long burnout down the road, and the car handled it beautifully. I mean, it was a really fun little muscle car. Back to present day, customer walks into the dealership, furious. Somebody beat the heck out of this car before I bought it. This is bullshit. Blah, blah, flipping out. I go, oh, nobody's beating the car up. I said, what's the issue here? He goes, I'm going through these performance page things on the cluster, and it says somebody's done 172 miles an hour in this car. And I go outside and I go and look at the car. I go, you see how it's got this sticker on here that says engineering test vehicle on the driver's window? He goes, yeah. And the sticker is something that you'll see occasionally on a Chrysler product that says this vehicle was used as a quality control vehicle. Engineers might have driven it. And the cars typically came in if they had that sticker with about 40, 50 miles on it. The engineers must have taken it out and, they have a test track at the factory, so they must have gotten it up to like 170 because nobody here did that. And besides, where are you going to do 172 miles an hour around here? The roads are terrible. And he calmed down. I said, when they break in cars like this, they typically run a lot faster too. And he goes, really? I said, yeah. I said, it's a good thing that you got a car like this. And he seemed to perk up at that idea and left the dealership happy. And it was only a year or two later where it occurred to me that one of the two managers might have been the one that did 172 instead of Chrysler.